Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Well, we have a fun show for you today. A friend of the show, she's been on, this will be her third time, I believe, was arrested in Hamilton yesterday just for showing up, it seems. I'm going to just skip the long-winded intro and just introduce Caryma Sa'd right now. Caryma, welcome to the show. How are you? Are you okay? How are your wrists?
Thank you for having me back. I am fine. I will be fine. Wrists are still a little bit sore, but all things considered, I feel relatively unscathed. And here I am talking about it.
Yeah. So listen, I'm going to play the video. I know that there's a lead up to it. There's context that we have to sort of establish and everything. But just to set it up though, you went to a Doug Ford event. You were saying that you were invited. Was that because everyone was sort of invited on the ad, or were you specifically RSVP'd and invited after trying to get a pass or whatever to get to the rally? How did that work?
It was a general invitation and an instruction to RSVP online. So I followed that instruction. I received a personalized confirmation email, and I used my real name and my very public email address. So I was of the understanding that I would be permitted to attend the event because that's what the email said.
And then you got there, and you had a guy who looked kind of like our education minister for the problem. I don't know who it was, but he looked kind of like Leachy. You guys were debating back and forth about, well, I was invited, and he's like, yes, but we know what you're all about. And he wouldn't really be specific. We've seen your Twitter, he says. And I think you responded something like, so you think I'm mean? Is that why I'm not allowed in? This is really interesting for me because conservatives are always the ones that are like all about, oh, I hate political correctness. They should at least respect your game, if not support it, right? Like they should at least be able to like take a punch or two. But this was the arrest video. I'm going to play the arrest video, and then we're going to come back because there's so many things I want to ask you about this because I find it really weak. And I think that they did you a favor. What would the worst thing that could have happened if you walked in? You've never actually been a belligerent, aggressive, combative person. Often, you're standing there in the middle of convoy protesters. Sometimes you're just standing there, and they're all shouting at you, and you're just like, okay. And there doesn't seem to be any aggression on your side. So this is the video of you getting arrested, and then we'll circle back.
Hold on, let her. Can you let her leave? Can she leave?
No, she had her opportunity.
This is the Hamilton police arresting me for political dissent.
When you're under arrest, you
Can I
don't
please
get your
give him my
property.
phone, please?
It's the fascist that runs this country.
Can I give him my phone,
No,
please?
you
This
cannot.
is a reflection of what Doug Ford
Can I give him my phone, please?
No, you cannot.
Can I give him my phone, please?
I lost your sound, James.
There we are. Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, I don't know how much of that got played because there seems to. I'm in a storm right now and like a tornado warning.
I saw all of it.
You
I
saw
saw
it?
all
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, first of all, my first question is why did he rip your phone out of your hand with such vigor? Like he was such a tough guy there. What was that about?
I think that was retaliation for me addressing the camera and suggesting that I was being removed because of my political opinions. Um, and you can't, you can hear it if you listen sort of slowly and closely. But he says, like, you don't get to have property when you're arrested. And then, yeah, just yanked it out of my hands. For no good reason. This was a ticket. I was issued a ticket. So it would have been, I think, the proper course of action if, he thought I was refusing to leave, which I never refused to leave. For him to just issue me that ticket, the cuffing, the putting me in the cruiser, all of that, I think was completely unnecessary and just it was bullying.
Yeah, it looked like that too. And so there was something last week that was above my pay grade that I think Ryan Linz from the Dean Blundell show mentioned about how there is a certain I don't know if it's a law, but that where they can like consider an area private property so that the police can arrest people who trespass. Maybe they did it to the nurses last week.
Right, right. I think what that's referring to is where something is taking place on private property. If sort of the owner or the occupant is authorized under the Trespass Act to trespass someone, and that can extend to police. So, either Doug Ford's security are able to act as agents, or sort of delegate that role to police. Um, and I think that that's what happened. That I was trespassed arbitrarily, and whether there was authority to revoke that invitation, seemingly without basis, given that this was advertised as a public event and, is a political rally. So, sort of, it
Yeah.
serves a purpose in democracy, in theory, right?
And so listen, like we all know who you are and what you do. You're tough on Doug Ford. You're part of the political ether. You're well known, but you're not you're different from the other people, the other personalities that get banned from other events. But I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are on things like Rebel News, Menzies, and people like that getting banned from events. And is this the same, but just on the other side of the political spectrum, or is there a difference between banning you and banning Rebel News?
I mean, to advocate for myself, I think the main difference is I go places to be something of a fly on the wall. Occasionally, I have people come up and interact with me, and there are times where I will more deliberately insert myself into a story just in the way that I present myself. For example, that time I wore a hazmat suit to Peterborough, but I don't like go and try to provoke reactions. I'm not antagonistic to people I encounter. That's just not my style. So to the and kind of my coverage flowing from that is largely unedited. The I'll try to keep like relevant parts of a clip, but I really make great efforts to not misrepresent things or be inaccurate. So I think there is like that's a comparison point. Um, Compared to outlets that are maybe a bit more fast and loose with hyperbole, or are less vigorous on fact checking, share information that's verifiably untrue. But, you know, all this leads up to the question of who is the arbiter of that and who is the, who decides what is truth. And we are, I've been saying this, in something of an epistemic crisis, right? Where people don't know how to discern what is true, what is knowledge, what is reality, it is a serious problem. So I don't know. I think my views on this will continue to evolve. And I think that one's behavior, um, like that's significant, right? Like it's going to be a factual, like a fact based assessment. I don't think you can have hard and fast rules. Um, I, you know what I mean? Like, I think that it is very fact dependent.
Yeah. Listen, I agree with you. I have a tough time with the rebel stuff. I remember, I think it was the last election, not the pandemic one, but the one before that. Could have been the pandemic one. They were so close together. But when I think it was Andrew Lawton, Rebel got a chance to go and ask Trudeau a question in the scrum after I don't know if it was after the debate. I can't remember, and he wasted the question on himself. He's like, why was Rebel News banned from this? Why am I being singled out? Why aren't I having my question answered? And so I was sort of mortified by the fact that they actually let him ask a question and he made it all about himself. Whereas you're more like, I like your style because you're more like a gonzo journalist. I'm a big Hunter S. Thompson fan. And I think that the way that you executed, it must be infuriating to Doug Ford's camp because you're not combative. Your presence itself, you could say nothing and they would be, I don't really like the cut of that woman's jib. I don't like it at all. And it seems to me that that they're afraid of you. And also you're a woman of color. You're Palestinian, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if they know that. They obviously know that you're a woman of color. Do you? I hate asking this question because it's hard to ask a question like this when I don't know the answer myself, and I don't want to like make it seem like I'm trying to like paint Doug Ford's entire campaign as racist. But do you think that being a woman of color has something to do with it?
I think that I occupy a space that is traditionally held by people who don't look like me. And that's true in terms of my status as a lawyer, um, as someone who goes out on the ground to protests that, often are right leaning. I don't fit that mold, and I'm outspoken about my views, and that's not um, the preconceived expectation that people have. And I think that makes me all the more grating if I were to hazard a guess. So I don't think that my identity is necessarily the primary reason that I was singled out. In fact, I don't think that's the case at all. And one of the candidates, in the Hamilton area, was a racialized woman who I spoke with briefly, and then she tossed me like a hot potato to her campaign manager when she realized what I was asking her and why I was banned from this event. And she's like, I don't know anything about that. And, he kind of stepped in. So I don't think that it's, purely an identity thing. And in fact, I think identity politics and the idea of representation, like that can be manipulated in very cynical ways and, used to kind of provide a shield that deflects from underlying serious issues. But I do think that part of the reason I was handled the way I was compared to everyone else who was in the vicinity is because I was mouthing off and I have no standing to do that, and I should know my role.
You also are a very hard-hitting political commentator when you do it with via your cartoons and stuff like that. Like, I know this isn't Doug Ford, but when I look at this, I'm like, I'm laughing. I'm laughing for a bunch of reasons. One is because Caryma and I kind of worked on this together, although you did the heavy lifting. But I mean, if you have a rabble rouser that only rabble rouses through cartoons and is extraordinarily polite and non-combative in person, I don't know what you do with that if you're afraid of that. I mean, personally, I think you let that person in because what he's done now is 1 million people have now seen you be arrested at the rally. So that means that 1 million people are now asking questions. A bunch of people are looking for stuff online, and I think this is like one of those Streisand effect situations where it's like, I didn't want her to come in and mess up my campaign, so I got her arrested, and 1 million people saw it, and now my campaign is fucked up. Like, you know, it didn't bode well for him. I'm wondering if you had thought of approaching a media that's already accredited for this campaign, like a Now magazine or something like that, and ask them to insert you at the campaign so that you're an accredited member of the press.
Honestly, that's never occurred to me. That might not be a bad idea. I genuinely thought that following their protocol for registration and showing up as an interested citizen would be sufficient, because I don't require special media access. There's nothing special about what I was trying to do. I was, for all intents and purposes, I would blend in with every other rally goer. But maybe that's something to think about, because yeah, is it a lack of credentials? And then, you know, I am a pretty well-credentialed person, so
Yeah.
that doesn't really make sense.
I wouldn't try to get one under the Dean Blundell network. I just don't think that would work. Like they might refuse you for that. But a Now magazine or a radio station or something, I think they would. I think, and then they wouldn't. Then they would have to ban. It wouldn't be banning Caryma. It would be banning. Say it was Now magazine. It would be banning Now magazine from the event, and then that press would feed itself. But I mean, are you going to continue to go to the rallies? I hope so.
I had an invitation or an RSVP for a Kitchener event today. But, you know, I am still a little bit shaken up from what happened yesterday. And I think, you know, I think it might be counterproductive. And what's important about the situation isn't that this happened to me, although on a personal level, obviously, I find that troublesome. But it's that this is part of a pattern, a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability. And so I'm not trying to force the story to be Caryma keeps getting arrested. I don't want to escalate this. I would like answers to the very reasonable questions that I was asking. And I don't think that I am going to give up entirely on attending events, but I did need a breather.
How much was the ticket for?
It was free. There was no.
No. I mean the ticket that they gave you for trespassing.
Oh, I think it's like $65. But I will be challenging that and requesting a trial date.
Are you going to represent yourself?
No, I will be working. I anticipate working with James Bowie.
Okay.
He is a lawyer out in Ottawa. He did a lot of the convoy bail coverage, and I think has an academic interest in this. Given that as an Ottawa resident, he saw sort of protests settle in and be enabled by police, whereas my inquiries were shut down with lightning speed.
It's interesting. I'm trying to remember all the events that I've been ousted from. There's been more than a few. But the one that stands out is Jim Flaherty's funeral. I got ousted from. I know. I'm not as classy as you. I'm really not. But I went there honestly because it was a historical event in a sense. It was at the St. James Cathedral, I think, in Toronto. And I wanted to interview people on their way into the church. So I did. Jason Kenney stopped and said some stuff. Tom Mulcair talked to me. And then I always forget his name, the gazebo guy that had to leave politics because of the
Vic Taus?
No, not Vic Taus. The guy with the glasses that was a conservative cabinet minister that had that picture with the bubbles in the back, and then he had to leave because he was like cavorting online with someone, even though he was married. His name will come back to me. He was the gazebo guy that took infrastructure money and gave his town a $280,000 gazebo. Anyways, he was going to stop, and Tony Clement. It was Tony Clement. And I'm like, sir, do you have anything that you'd like to say about Jim Flaherty? And he's like, no, I can't believe you're even allowed here. And I'm like, well, Jason Kenney talked to me. And he's like, I'm not Jason Kenney. And then he ran to somebody and was like, can you get that guy out? And the guy turned and looked at me and he's like, I already kicked that guy out. You're back again? I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. Right. And I left. but no one cuffed me. Like it's so weird that that you got handcuffed. Like that really at the end of the day, if they don't want you in the event, I guess they don't have to let you in, even though they already RSVP'd. They could have given you an answer that was like, look, we RSVP'd. But now that we realize who you are, we don't want you in the event because we just don't want a possible disruption. I'm really sorry, but you're not allowed in. Things would have been a little bit different, I think. But the fact that they cuffed you, that is where I'm like, I don't know if I don't even know if I'm a big supporter of the human rights tribunals, but this sounds like something that you could actually bring to the human rights tribunal to tell them, listen, like that, for a $65 ticket for not, and you weren't being aggressive. You weren't like fighting anyone, you spitting at anyone. The most offensive thing that you probably did was wear the wrestling shirt that sort of matched the colors of the cop uniforms. I don't know if you knew that, but when you look when I look at the picture, that's the first thing I noticed. I'm like, oh, okay, it matches a little. But they were aggressive with you, and that to me matters even more than not being allowed in the event.
Yeah, happening in parallel was another individual who was trespassed, a white man. And, his reaction to police was a lot more colorful. And I am not at all suggesting that this person should have received more heavy-handed treatment. I think it was appropriate to just kind of keep letting him back away and spout off verbally, you cocksucking pigs or whatever he was saying. But it was, a very different interaction. And like, this was a sergeant, I believe, who just got irritated that I wanted an answer to a question and didn't kind of immediately submit and decide to leave. But I didn't refuse to leave either. So,
yeah, you said you wanted to wait, right? You wanted to wait for the cops to get there in order to
Yeah, I wanted to wait for answers. The scrawny guy, Zach, who's the one who doesn't let me in places. I only know his name because I overheard it in a clip where Ivana calls to him while they were trying to kick David Menzies out of the campaign kickoff. So that's where I get his name from, because he refused to identify himself. He wouldn't say if he was holding sort of a security license, if he was a volunteer, what his role was specifically. So I didn't have a real authority tell me to leave. I had sort of a stranger with an earpiece who could be acting of his own accord. I have no idea. So I wanted to talk to police, and police were quite unhelpful. And in response to me wanting information that I think I ought to have been entitled to. And I this will be part of the case, I think, but, is there kind of an implied invitation, sort of seeing where we were standing? It was more of a parking lot area. I had this actual express invitation. What is the basis for arbitrarily withdrawing that? Does there need to be one, or is it so easy on private property to just rescind? Those are all kind of questions that are still floating in my head. But none of it warranted the physical response. They could have done all of that without touching me.
The last time that I remember the Conservatives banning somebody from an event that had a public profile was Patrick Brown. When he dropped out, remember he was ousted out of the party, and then he went back into the leadership race and then dropped back out of the leadership race. And they banned him preemptively. He never showed up, but they said he wasn't allowed in, and they banned people that were carrying his book that came out like 2 days before the leadership. But that's the only one I can think of. I honestly, do you think it's just like an overkill? Oh, don't let her in, or do you think that there is something to it, like where because they seem to be walking away with this election?
Yeah, I think
so. I can't tell if it's cockiness or just them not thinking it through very clearly as to what it would look like in the post-event press. Which, by the way, I haven't found any outlet that's been like they were right to manhandle her and kick her out of this event for sure. I haven't heard anyone say that yet.
I think it's very plausible that it was just poor planning and incompetence, given the record of the progressive conservatives in Ontario. So that is a plausible explanation. But I think sort of another potential answer, which is more sinister, is that, they felt the election was in the bag. Maybe they still feel the election is in the bag. Maybe it is in the bag. And there's a sense of we will do this because we can. And that, given that we're a week away from the election, like normally this is, you're on your best behavior, right? If this is the best they have to offer, that to me is a scary signal. So that's where my head is at.
I understand what you're saying, and you're smarter than me, so you probably you're probably right. But I would just keep going. I would just keep going. I wouldn't try to make me the story. I would just keep going. I would just be very quiet and casual and polite. I would keep getting kicked out. I would keep getting arrested. I would keep getting tickets. I would and then at the end of the day, every time they do that, they're kind of showing themselves as being either afraid or way overconfident in the fact that the public won't be kind of outraged about this. Again, 1 million people saw you get arrested, and now I'm wondering, have you decided what you're going to do as far as from here until the election goes? If you're not going to go to events, are you stepping up your game a little bit in the political cartoons? Are you going to be doing, more interviews? Are you going to be doing segments from outside? Like, do you have a plan of action right now?
No, I don't. And I mean, this is like one thing that I think maybe gets lost sometimes in the conversation is that I do this pretty much as a hobby, right? So it's not like this isn't an income stream for me. This is just out of my own interest and passion, and hopefully to serve the public interest in some way. So I haven't ruled out going to events. I just know that I didn't try attending Kitchener tonight. What you described, right? Keep showing up and just be present. That's been my approach to attending, rallies, like so-called freedom rallies, the convoy occupation, all of that, where people recognize me and want me to go. The difference being that for the most part, that happens on public property. The one time it was a private event, I did actually get the boot. So yeah, now I am up to 3 places that I've been kicked out of, which is a new experience for me actually. And maybe I'll get more graceful at it as we progress.
If you need any advice, on how to handle being kicked out of places, I'm your guy. I am your tutor. I swear.
Nothing like that. So this is, it's very surreal. But I'm not giving up, and I'm not going to stop talking. So right now, kind of my immediate concern is that Hamilton Police lied in their statement, and said that I was a protester, that I was trying to block roads. I was with a group that was, behaving in that way. I would dispute that characterization wholeheartly. I was there on my own with my cameraman. And the protest group that's being referred to, they also were like, they didn't stay on the private property where they weren't allowed to stay. They moved onto, a public road, and they conducted themselves, I think, appropriately. And when the scope of the trespass was expanded, and this is interesting because, part of that property is publicly owned. So there was some level of a public entity signing off on the, like, Doug Ford and friends and Hamilton police to have authority to trespass people. So that's something that needs to be looked further into. This relationship is quite cozy, it seems. But I wasn't a protester, and so I've been expending a lot of energy trying to make that clear. And it's very frustrating to be lied about by police, and there is a misplaced, I think, inherent sense of trust in what police tell us, and it just wasn't true. So, like, I don't know, that's my kind of an immediate concern, because I am actually, or I try to be a law-abiding citizen.
I have it on good authority that you just stole a grilled cheese from the Sheridan Center. So
Why I said try. The sandwich there was maybe an implied invitation to eat it.
okay, I'm just playing. I haven't seen police, by the way, act at the behest or seemingly act at the behest of a leader since the G20 protests in 2010, when they turned Toronto into like a cage match, and apparently Harper was basically getting the RCMP to do things that were completely ridiculous, like kettle people and take them off, and almost everyone that got arrested, no one got charged with anything. Almost every single case was thrown out. Almost every single ticket was thrown away. But I haven't seen it since then. This is a first for me. And if that's the case, I'm still kind of like a little bit cloudy on whether or not the OPP seems to be acting at the behest of Doug Ford, but it's starting to look that way with the nurses last week. With you getting arrested, it doesn't seem to be like something that he's going to stop doing. Like, if you did show up, you probably get arrested again.
He made a statement like congratulating Hamilton police and thanking them for their work and a job well done, which, I don't think it was a job very well done, unless your perspective is just get that creature out of my vicinity, because it worked to that extent, but it wasn't a job well done.
And they also, I've been seeing stuff, and to be honest, I scroll through it sometimes because I don't want to be bothered with it, to be honest, but I've been seeing a couple of people that have seemed to be trolling you by saying that one of the reasons maybe that why you were kicked out is because you were advocating violence against Jewish people last week at some protests. And I was like, what? Yeah. Oh, I'll send it to you if I can find it. Again, I was like, what? No, that's stupid. I kept on scrolling. But yeah, apparently you were at a protest that was advocating violence against Israelis. See, this is what they do. This is what they do.
I was at a protest on Nakba Day, but like nothing anti.
Oh, they probably just meant that just because you were there,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. People, there's all sorts of like rumors floating about me, which is very strange to have strangers like lie on your name. And people are too comfortable doing it, way too comfortable, from behind a screen or what they think might be an anonymous account. But, reckoning will come.
Reckoning will come. Let's end it there because I like that. I hope that you continue to do what you normally would do. In a way, I'm kind of hopeful that you pretend that the arrest didn't happen and you just go on as if you didn't experience that. So it doesn't impact the good work that you do. I'm being serious. Like, I think that please keep on putting out cartoons. There's an election a week away. You have so much time to drop flying elbows from top ropes that I'm really hopeful that you do that.
That's just not over yet. That is correct.
That is right. Caryma Sa'd, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. We'll see you again soon. Bye. There she is. My superhero. I have to buy that woman a cape. I've been talking about it for a year. She needs a cape. Listen, no matter what your views are on Doug Ford and his party, that is weak. He's running scared of a person who literally just showed up because she was invited. And then the police, the Hamilton police, not a good look for you guys either. I'm very hopeful that that Caryma continues to do the work that she's doing. This is a quick episode today for me, but I think that I got in all that I wanted. Go support her. Follow her if you haven't followed her already. Retweet her work. Take a look at all the political cartoons that she's done. She's literally like revamped and revitalized what a political cartoon is. It doesn't have to be all the black and white ink stuff anymore. It can look like a comic book, and she does a really good job. So on that note, we're going to leave now. I have a special election episode coming up on election day, and I'll announce that probably on Monday. And a couple surprise guests next week as well. So please stay tuned. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Blackballed. Thank you.
Blackballed. 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 Black.